Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, did you hear the one about the stand-up comedian and the serial entrepreneur? No, this isn't a joke. Today's guest is Ollie Horn, and he is a stand-up comedian and serial entrepreneur who founded his first bootstrap startup way back in 2010 and sold it in 2018. But in a world of doom and gloom, 24-hour rolling news channels, stories of a Great Depression, job losses, and so much more, it's so easy to feel incredibly downbeat right now. And it's easy to feel that there is no way forward. So after 1,200 episodes, I've somehow managed to link the world of tech and comedy, all in a bid to bring a few smiles to all of our faces. So today, we will learn how Ollie uses his skills that he has learned as a stand-up comedian to help startup founders raise money, hire people, and make sales, and why he believes that storytelling is one of the most powerful tools that any tech entrepreneur can use to connect their big ideas with the real world. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Malaysia, where Ollie is waiting to share his story and keep us smiling with a few jokes too. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Ollie. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name's Ollie Horn. I'm a stand-up comedian and entrepreneur, originally from the UK, but I spent the last 5 or 6 years dotting around various countries making mischief.
Love it. And I've got to begin by asking, how did you go from being a stand-up comedian to a serial entrepreneur? And dare I ask, how do these two worlds ever overlap?
Well, that's a really good question. So I think most stand-up comedians are entrepreneurs. I mean, apart from kind of the top 1% of comedians who have their entire working lives managed for them, the majority of stand-ups, even if they have management or even if they work with PR firms or production companies, they do kind of run their own little businesses. Often comedians will be booking their own diaries and, helping to produce their own shows, or, even Louis C.K. does the editing of his own specials. Maybe he does that these days now because no one will work with him. but he did that even before he disgraced himself. So, most stand-ups I think are naturally quite kind of entrepreneurial. And so I never really felt like I kind of went from one to the other. I certainly started thinking about business and entrepreneurship from a really early age. I think I built my drum teacher a website when I was 14 and charged her more money than I was paying her for drum lessons. And then ended up kind of getting into stand-up while I was at university, obviously as a hobby. That's how everyone starts. But then slowly, managed to get more gigs and realized that it's a great chance to tour the world. And so, I've never really seen them as kind of one following the other, but, they're both two extensions of things that I like doing.
And we will have a lot of startup founders listening, wanting to learn from other founders out there. So I'm kind of curious here. How do you use the skills that you've learned as a stand-up comedian to help startup founders raise money, hire people, and make sales? Is there anything you can share on that?
Yeah, so I do actually do some consulting in exactly this space, because I think one of the main things that you have to do as a stand-up comedian, and I'm talking specifically about a stand-up comedian that's gigging live, going to a live comedy club or touring, a touring comic, is you turn up at a venue and you have to very quickly assess who you're speaking to, and you have to, for want of a better word, read the room, right? You can't just turn up on stage and do the same old routine. You have to somehow find a way to make what you're doing present and engaging and authentic. And I think something that, in my view, marks out some of the most talented startup founders, and certainly the startup founders which have been the most successful. They're not just the ones who are technically savvy or the ones which understand business, but they're the ones which are able to bring people with them on a journey, right? They're the ones that are the best storytellers. They're the ones that are able to persuade people that the world is a certain way. The world doesn't need to be this way. And I'm the protagonist in the story, which you're going to be part of. which will change the world into this new, fantastic, inevitable future where we can do this more cheaply, or less people die because of this, or there's more equality in this sector, or whatever, whatever it is, right? And so I think one of the main things that a stand-up comedian does is you explain the world as the audience knows it, right? So you kind of say, hey, we've all noticed this, or hey, we've all felt this way. And then you'll introduce something new, right? You'll bring a new take or a new perspective, or you'll maybe comment on something which people have already noticed but never really thought about or not really articulated in that way. And then you'll provide some kind of funny resolution, right? Then you'll break the tension by providing a punchline. And for a startup founder, that's exactly what they need to do. They need to be, whether they're pitching, whether they're employing people, whether they're trying to make a sale, you need to start by having empathy for your prospects and start by working out what shared view of the world you both have. Then you introduce something new and novel, which maybe they don't know about. And then you provide some interesting or enticing or exciting or profitable or whatever it is, whatever your value proposition is, you provide some resolution, which kind of ties that together. And so I think that if you're a startup founder and you're not thinking about how you're presenting what you're doing to the rest of the world, then the chances of you succeeding, in my view, are very, very slim. And so I think that's the main thing you can learn from what a stand-up comedian does.
And there are so many elements to your story that I find intriguing. And before you came on the podcast today, I did do a little bit of research on you, and I quickly learned about the journey you had with LinguaLift, where I believe you pioneered learning over asynchronous communication in online education. And then from there, went on to teach over 500,000 users foreign languages from Russian to Japanese. But can you share that journey just for anyone that's not heard it?
Yeah, so LinguaLift was kind of my first proper startup, first proper business, founded in 2011. Founded it with my co-founder, Philip, who's a Russian individual. He was living in the Czech Republic at the time, but went to a French school. So, a real kind of polyglot, and also, just a super smart guy that knows how to code and how to write and how to, do all sorts of incredible things. And we both were learning languages. So I was studying the Japanese language because I found it interesting. I also learned French at school, and he, at the time, I think spoke 6 languages. And we were both fairly young, and we both knew that the promise that existing language learning solutions were making to their customers was not being met, right? You've got to cast your mind back to kind of 2010, 2011, the Rosetta Stone days, right? This is pre-Duolingo, where you were getting TV adverts saying, hey, you can become fluent in German in just 4 weeks. All you need to do is click some buttons of a cat, and then all of a sudden you'll be, ordering a glass of wine in France, and you won't, and it's just nonsense, right? And so the main thing that we realized was that, firstly, people were persuaded that they could learn a language online. So kind of all of that hard work of kind of educating a public had already been done by the incumbents, but they weren't actually delivering on that. And so what we were thinking was, well, we know that you can learn a language by just using textbooks and having tutors, right? I learned my French absolutely the traditional way, just having good teachers and, putting in hard work. And so we thought, well, what if we were to find a way of getting all the benefits of having a live tutor, right? Of having a tutor which is invested in your education, but at a radically lower cost. And so we kind of thought about, well, what is it about a tutor? What is it that a tutor does that is actually providing value, right? So obviously a language tutor does all sorts of things, right? They work out the best curriculum for you. They teach you new topics. They correct your mistakes. They provide motivation for your study. They help you with your discipline. And so we thought, well, there must be some aspects of a private tutor's work that can be automated, right? Or there must be some way of delivering a course which doesn't need a private tutor to be always present. And we thought, if we can do that, if we can find ways to automate the stuff which can be automated, leaving the private tutor time to do what they really do best, which is these kind of really specific interventions when a learner is just about to give up, right? Those are the moments where I think EdTech really shines, right? When you understand that a learner is about to make a breakthrough, and if only they had one little intervention, they'll make it, and it's super motivational and blah, blah, blah. And so we realized that if we used asynchronous text communication, basically pre-populating certain messages but also allowing actual genuine tutors to look at study progress and make interventions when they need to. Rather than one tutor having 100 students, instead they could have 1,000 students. But those the student experience of those 1,000 students would be roughly approximate to if they had that real tutor, because they still have that same sense of discipline, sense of structure, high quality learning. So that's kind of what we were doing at Lingualift, and so we managed to basically create a fairly profitable business by living up to a promise, and that promise was you will learn a language, and people ultimately did. And so there's no secret to the business, and obviously because it's software, it was a fairly attractive a fairly attractive proposition for someone who wanted to buy the company.
And I thought that I spin a lot of plates, but I also believe you've ended up moving to Japan. You're speaking to me in Malaysia, and you've even got 2 podcasts. I mean, can you share the story behind that too?
Yeah, so the podcasts are easily explained. I went through a bad breakup, so needed to start a podcast. And now I have 2 podcasts. So that wasn't
the result of 2 breakups, was it?
I'm afraid so.
Don't break up again, whatever you do.
A third podcast would be hard to manage, wouldn't it? Well, I suppose the Japan thing's fairly easily explained. I graduated from law school in the UK and got accepted to a postgraduate research program, which was sponsored by the Japanese government. So I was always interested in Japan and the Japanese language. That was the first language we taught on our platform. And so if someone offers you a monthly stipend and a chance to go live in a different country for a couple of years, then I think you're mad to not take it. So that's what took me to Japan originally. And I did some absolutely fascinating research on the international registrability of foreign word marks. So hold your horses. Stop with the questions. I've said enough. And then I hung around in Japan for a bit longer, doing some work with startups, obviously running my business remotely, and also I did a bit of work in the media there. So I did a bit of TV presenting and radio reporting and stuff, which if you're white and have the right attitude, just seems to get handed to you out there for better or worse. And the podcasts, they happened because, well, the first podcast that I started is called My Signature Dish, and that's related to the new venture which I started with the same co-founder, the one which I started Lingualift with, and the one which we have our consultancy together. And this was our new project, which was basically looking at how the world of edtech can intersect with the future of food. And so we saw a huge opportunity in leveraging what we know and what we consult on in the world of edtech and blended learning and teaching people at scale and ensuring compliance remotely and digitally in the food space. And so that podcast is basically, I love talking to people about food. And so it's just interviews with talented home cooks and finding out what their one signature dish is. And so we end up just talking about that for an hour. And I really like it. I mean, it hasn't got the biggest listenership in the world, but the people that do like it seem to salivate every episode. And then the other podcast is a bit of fun that I do with another stand-up comedian who's based in Japan, an American chap called Bobby Judo. The podcast is called Japan by River Cruise, which purportedly is an expose of the Japanese river cruise industry for 30 minutes each week. Obviously, the reality is it's just me and my friend talking guff for 30 minutes.
But one of the things I absolutely love about you, your story and everything that you're doing here is you just can't be pigeonholed. Like you said, you've also got experience in edtech and in the food space. So can you expand on that a little bit more and how those two complement each other?
Yeah, so I suppose I am a jack of all trades and master of none. I like the way you put it. Well, yeah. So the intersection between food and edtech is basically any time where improving somebody's abilities has some kind of economic leverage, right? We see as just a huge opportunity for business. That is to say, if you can. Let's put it this way. If you can take someone that is selling a meal for $2 on a street cart, but give them the tools to brand themselves, to improve the quality of their presentation, to better understand their customers, then that kind of $2 or $3 extra which they're leaving on the table by not having made those steps is just lost, right? And so we always thought if you can use education as a way of improving the food delivery space, then it's kind of a win for everybody, right? It will reduce food waste. It will hopefully eventually lower food costs. It will bring more people into the space, provide more variety. And so this is what we've been doing at Pona for the last 18 months. We've been creating tools where talented home cooks could learn how to start their home cooked food business. And so rather than having to worry about how to package foods or health and safety compliance or delivery stuff, there's just a place for them to go where they can tool up and basically start their business only worrying about what they do best, which is preparing great food.
So I'm going to ask you a very difficult question now. What do you think the secret is to your success? And what's the biggest lesson that you've learned along your journey that's took you all over the world?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm successful yet, but I would say one very strongly held conviction I have is I never let there be a system get in the way of something. Right, that is to say, every time you feel that there's some barrier, something preventing you from being able to do something, right? Maybe you don't have the qualifications, or you don't have the network, or you don't have the experience, or it seems like there's a closed world, right? There is always a system, right? And that system, as long as you put the effort in to understand it, can always be unlocked somehow. And generally, understanding that system and leveraging that system is never about kind of being an expert at that system. It's just about knowing. It's just about knowing the right way to approach it. And so often the way in which you can kind of get into a new field is by leveraging experience in another field. And when I look at people that I admire or kind of successful entertainers or successful entrepreneurs, they're never the best at one thing, right? They're very, very rarely people that are hyper specialized. They tend to be people that have kind of got 80% good in 2 or 3 fields. And I think as long as you kind of work with a sense of purpose, you'll find the way of unifying everything you do eventually. And yeah, it's true. Like I do 3 or 4 different things and they all seem to be entirely disconnected. But what that does mean is that eventually when someone does rarely need that kind of unique set of skills, right? When you have, a company that needs training on how to leverage kind of performance and presentation skills and storytelling into startup pitching, then all of a sudden there's only like a few dozen people in the world that can do it, right? And so when those opportunities come along, you can really provide value. So I'd say if there is a secret, I don't think there is a secret, but the one thing that kind of guides me is knowing that there's always going to be a way of leveraging whatever you're doing. It doesn't have to be right away. It could be eventually, as long as you do so with a sense of purpose and conviction, and you're genuinely interested in yourself. And there's absolutely no shame in not being perfect at something. And there's absolutely nothing to worry about if you see there's some system or some wall or some gate that seems impenetrable, because there's always a way in.
Absolutely. And what's next for you then, Ollie? I've got a feeling you're going to have a few other things up your sleeve. You probably can't share too much, but is there anything you can?
Yeah, so I recorded my first comedy special. I recorded that last year, which was the show which I did at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival last year and subsequently took on tour. That's going to be released online. So if anyone's interested in seeing that, the show is called Ollie Horn Pig in Japan. That's Pig in Japan. And it kind of tells the story of how I ended up accidentally working in the Japanese media industry and kind of what that taught me. And so if you'd like to get a copy of that, you can do so from my website on olliehorn.com. Also, I really see the pandemic as kind of an opportunity. I'm not trying to do what other comics are doing, which is just kind of trying to do online stand-up gigs. I find them really, really hard, and I can't say I enjoy them very much. But I have an online game show, a panel show, which with my producer Stephen Case, we take to comedy festivals and do corporate events. We basically get 3 comedians to answer daft questions that have been posed by a live audience. So we survey the audience before the show starts, find out their demographic data and project it. And so we're looking at ways to do that online. I'm also starting to do more consulting and training entirely online. So helping companies and individuals who want help in the kind of the growth stages of their startup, or helping clarify their story if they're having to pitch or if they're having to hire or present themselves. So I actually see an opportunity to kind of do more of that online. And yeah, I mean, in the future, who knows? I genuinely couldn't tell what I'm going to be doing 10 years from now. But I'm sure that if you check in with me in 10 years' time, you'll still be criticizing me for doing too much and not yet finding any synthesis.
I would never criticise you for that. Now, I was chatting with a CEO the other day, and he was telling me that the big joke doing the rounds in Silicon Valley at the moment is, who is driving your digital transformation? Is it the CEO, the CFO, or CTO? Or is it COVID-19? And he said that was a big joke doing Silicon Valley, but I think they should stick with the tech and stay away from comedies. But before I let you go, can I ask that you share a tech-based joke with us all today?
Well, you're kind of putting me on the spot. And also, is there any industry more hilarious than Silicon Valley, right? Yeah. Just, some of the nonsense. Who could have thought that you could create a juicer which doesn't actually juice but just squeezes a bag and charge $500 for it? So they sometimes I think it's beyond satire. A jokey joke. Okay, you might not like it, but it is a joke. I recently changed my stage name to 1023 megabytes, but never got any gigs.
Well, I love that. That's brilliant. So I put you on the spot there.
That's all right.
Before you go, can I ask that you remind everyone listening where they can find you online, check out your podcast, and equally contact you if they've got any questions after listening to us today?
Yeah, sure. So olliehorn.com will get you in touch with me. If you're interested in working out how EdTech can improve whatever business you're doing, then feel free to contact my consultancy, which is edulift.co, edulaft.co. I'm on Instagram, where I post videos of what I'm cooking and some stand-up. That's Ollie Horn Pics, OLLIEPICS. And you can find my podcasts in all the usual places. And hopefully, unless I have some other traumatic romantic experience, there'll only be 2 which appear when you search.
Well, like I said a few moments ago, one of the things I absolutely love about you is that you just cannot pigeonhole you. We've talked today about stand-up, being a stand-up comedian, bootstrapping entrepreneur, edtech, food, mobile apps, and you've remained remarkably humble through it all. And I don't see you as a jack of all trades at all. I think you should sell yourself as a Renaissance man, maybe something like that. But
yes. Allow me to just get my harp and conclude this interview with me singing a sonnet.
But thank you so much for joining me, Ollie. I really loved it today.
Thank you.
I think that is officially the most that I've laughed in a podcast after 1,200 interviews. And I just loved Ollie there and the stories that he shared, and how the role of a stand-up comedian is to actually have empathy for the audience. And that is precisely what a startup founder needs too. Empathy for their end users, to truly understand the persona and the problems that they're solving. Not to mention their investors and other stakeholders too. And when I was researching Ollie, I also landed on his Instagram page, where I saw the words, "Live your life, dream big, take risks, eat flan and love with all of your heart," which I think is a great moment to end on, because I think Ollie is a great guy, funny guy, a Renaissance man, but with a big heart. And for those reasons alone, there's always a big invite for him to return to this podcast in the future, where we'll hopefully be a post-pandemic world. So as always, now I turn the virtual microphone over to you. Do you have any tech-based jokes that you'd like to share? Are there any questions or insights that you'd like to send my way? Whatever it is, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website, of course, is techblogwriter.co.uk. And my new book, Great TED Talks, Innovation, an unofficial guide with words of wisdom from over 100 TED speakers, is also available in all the usual places too. But that's it from me, so try the veal, don't forget to tip the waitress on the way out, and I'll see you all tomorrow. So thanks for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.